Hello all. I'm going to go through this PowerPoint right now about do's and don'ts for cover letters, and this really applies to resumes too, because a lot of the feedback I have to give you guys on your cover letters is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and just cover it all right here. All right, so let's get started. The first thing you want to do whenever you're picking a cover letter is your font. Pick a good font. Pick something that is not too hard to read. Pick something that looks professional. Pick something that is not trendy or dated or overused. That's Comic Sans. That has been very widely overused. There's a joke going around with some friends of mine that work in the business world that they never want to see that again. Traditional, that is, I can't remember what that is. The traditional is always an option, but that can look a little dated. And if you use that, it could skew their thoughts to make whoever's hiring you think that you're older than what you are. Um, the train of thought used to be that that's what you always used. When I was growing up, when I first started putting my resume together, that's what you were supposed to use was this font. But that is no longer the case. There's a lot of instances where things have changed. Things are not like they used to be. And an example of that is resumes, but that's going to be another PowerPoint, the different types of resumes to put together. So the traditional is always an option. Simple always works. When in doubt, just go with simple. But simple does not mean informal, like what we have right there. Let's talk about the greetings because that is the next thing that you're going to be doing in your cover letter. Here in this particular email that someone, I'm sorry, in this particular cover letter that somebody put together, they have the person's name on their cover letter and they have their title, the hiring manager. But when they go to address the person, when they start the letter, they start it as Dear Hiring Manager, when it would have been much better to start it out with Dear Bobby Boss, like it is below. Something else we want to make sure we do is in the first letter, and this happens all the time, places will post multiple jobs for their establishment. You want to send a different letter for every one you're applying for. So where it says, thank you for the opportunity to apply for the role of manager or general manager, we're going to take that one out and make it just manager. Another good thing to do is to add the name of the company like we did right down there. So we have the person's name and their title at the top. Dear Mr. Boss, thank you for the opportunity to apply for the role of one job at your company, Bobby Bakes Bread. Sound good? This is even better. Here's an even better example. Hello, Mr. Boss. And you can see what is in red is what I have added to here. I have recently graduated from the Art Institute of Poughkeepsie, Atlanta, Dallas. Give the name of where you went. Same thing with restaurants. If you say, hey, I work at Chili's, give the location. Say the Chili's at Perimeter in Atlanta, like that. You want to give them information so they know. Um, you give your certificate, and then you want to give some information of why you would be beneficial to them. For example, I have worked in two kosher bakeries and I am well versed in gluten-free baking. I have also worked with allergen-sensitive ingredients and have recently begun learning sugar-free baking. So when I had my bakery, those are all things that would appeal to me if somebody came in to apply for a job. The kosher bakeries, not everybody can do that. It's good to have, and that's a big deal in certain parts of the country, certain parts of the city, even. Um, Gluten-free baking, obviously, everybody knows that right now is a big buzzword in baking. Allergen sensitive, that's not as common as everything else, but hey, it's a good thing to have, a good feather to have in your cap. And sugar-free baking, that's always going to be a thing because as diabetes rises and rises. All right. This one is even better. So what we have done here is this is exactly what was on the slide before, but we have added goals. My goal is to learn and be able to execute wedding cakes like the ones you produce. This shows that you have goals and you've researched their business to find out what they do, their specialty, because chances are when you go in for an interview, they're going to ask you, why do you want to work here? And now you can say, my goal is to learn to be able to execute wedding cakes like you do. Also, down at the bottom, the last sentence, I noticed on your website that you have 2 vegetarian items. I myself am a vegetarian and have several recipes that I can share with you. Again, this is something that shows that you researched their website, and it shows that you have something that you can contribute to this employer, but also that, I'm sorry, that you have an interest in their business. You want to help them grow. Always a good thing. So this one, outstanding. Next step, we're going to talk about from template to terrific. A lot of people, I noticed when I was going through and grading the items, there was a basic template that most people used, which is fine. That is absolutely fine. We're going to talk about some of the pitfalls of working with a template. Now, these are my own personal idiosyncrasies, like where it says, after reviewing your job description, it is clear that you're looking for a candidate that is extremely familiar with. Instead of saying extremely familiar with, say knowledgeable. It's just easier, it's more succinct. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes about, the KISS, keep it simple. Um, and that is, it's the same way here. Also, the last sentence, I am certain that I have the necessary skills to successfully do the job adeptly and perform above expectations. Instead of saying that, why not say, I am confident I have the necessary skills to execute the job while performing above expectations. Um, you have to be careful with a word like adept or adeptly. That is not something that is used every day, and it's very easy to use it when it sounds like you don't know how to use it. It really is. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. The next slide we're going to talk about is pictures, because somebody actually put a picture on their cover letter. So for your photo ops, there's some certain things you want to follow and make sure you do. Make sure your background looks like you put some thought into it, not like this one right here. No matter how beautiful this cake is, all I can see is everything that's around it. Non-traditional camera angles can work, but make sure it doesn't highlight something boring or genetic. So here's a cake. It's a topsy-turvy cake, but it is also at an angle. They have taken a picture of this cake at an angle to make it more interesting. Here's another example of a wedding cake that I did for someone. We, instead of taking a picture of the cake, from 5 feet away that shows the whole cake, wedding cakes can get repetitive and boring, and you just get tired of looking at them. So what we've done is done something like they would do in a photo shoot and gone in closer and just hit some of the details of it, because now they can imagine what the rest of the cake looks like. If you don't want to do some kind of interesting background, drop a sheet behind it. That's all this is right here. It just cleans it up, gets rid of all this clutter. If I had had a sheet big enough, I would have put it behind that cake. Or you can choose a background that is purposeful. Me being a pastry chef, I may choose to use a picture of me at a pastry convention showing that I'm attending events, or I may show it with something, use a picture of something that I've done that I consider noteworthy, like making the gingerbread house for the governor's mansion. Or I may show it with somebody that is significant or famous, like if I ran into Gordon Ramsay or someone like that, I might do a picture. Or the president, you never know. Okay, let's keep moving. How to avoid discrimination. Caution, be careful when using these terms. These are going to be some buzzwords to be careful of. Be careful when using the term college student, because all of these things can make them have a preconceived idea of what your age is. And you want to make sure that when they get your resume, they're not thinking about age, they're not trying to figure out your age, they just see the candidate. So be careful when you use the term college student. So instead of using college student, say you're pursuing your degree. Now, all of a sudden, to me, that sounds like you're not a child, but you could very well be an adult, going back to school. I need to do that. Be careful about which days you ask off for, yes, because if you tell them, if you're getting hired for a job and you put in your cover letter that you need to have every Sunday off, they're going to assume that you're doing that to go to church, and that can lead to just religious discrimination. So you want to avoid that as well. Also, don't talk about your children or husband or wife, because there are some places that, even though this is discrimination, If they hear that you have children, they might not hire you because they might think that you are unreliable, that you might have to stay out and take care of sick children, and yeah, you might. Don't discuss when you graduated from high school or anything else that can be used to determine your age. If I told you guys when I graduated from high school, you all would immediately say, oh my God. So don't do things like that. Uh, let's see what we're going to talk about next. Things that you can say. These are things that you can say. And this is dealing mainly with the overlap. I once had a student who, she was an older lady. She was in her 50s and she had no kitchen experience at all whatsoever. And she was very upset that she didn't have anything to put on her resume. And I asked her, what do you mean you don't have anything to put on your resume? And she said, I haven't worked in a kitchen. I was like, well, what have you done? And she's like, well, I've been a secretary at a company. And I'm like, okay, so you know how to answer the phone and deal with customers. She's like, well, yeah. And what else did you do? Well, I had to do the ordering. Okay, so you know how to do an ordering from a company. Well, yeah. Um, well, if you did the ordering, did you have to do the inventory? Well, yeah, I had to do the inventory too. So now all of a sudden, here are three things that aren't a basic intro for a person to have, skills for a person that's entering to have, that now all of a sudden she does have these things that she can put on there. So things that you can say. If I had someone come in to apply for me and they said, hey, my former job, I was a bookkeeper. I can help you manage your receipts and taxes. That's great. Something else. I noticed you don't have much of a social media presence. I'm good at that. Can I help you set it up? I'll run your Instagram account. Again, especially with people that are that have businesses and are more established at this point, they may not have had a lot of time to play around with social media. So this is something that you could help them out with, and I'm sure they would appreciate it. Here's a really good one. I've worked with photographers and have experience taking pictures and can help make pictures on your website look more polished and professional. If we go back to the pictures that I showed you guys earlier, this picture was actually taken, this was in a magazine. So the quality of it is much, 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 much better than the quality of the ones that I took. All right. Mine are still good, but not like that. It would have been nice to have help with that. Um, if anybody had ever walked into my bakery as they're applying for a job and I said, well, what was your former job? And they said, well, I was doing web design. I probably would hire them without any other kind of interview because you always are going to need help with designing your web page. If you're willing to help you set that up, that could be something that could be a wonderful thing. Here's something else. This is again one of my little things that is not necessarily wrong, but I think it could be better. This was in the template that everyone or a lot of people were using. And the word that I want to get rid of is leverage. I apply proven leadership, multitasking, and teamwork skills, which I hope to leverage into the chef role at your company. The reason I personally don't like it, it makes me think that it's self-serving. I'm trying to leverage myself into this. So here are some other options of other words that you can use instead of leverage. You can use develop. Again, it's simple, it's easy, but it can be a little boring. Transmute is a good word to use, but I mean, I think it perfectly states your intention, what you want to do, but it's a strange word to use out of a scientific setting. Convey sounds intelligent and mostly gets your point across, but I think the phrase that works best to substitute would be to trade on, because now it sounds like you're entering into an agreement with someone. You're entering into a relationship where I'm going to give you some stuff and you're going to give me some stuff back. It shows that you indicate you want to work with the employer while you guys both move forward. And to give the example, I apply proven leadership, multitasking, and teamwork skills, which I hope to trade on towards the culinary manager role in your company. Again, this is just a little idiosyncratic thing that I personally would want to change. This is all about showing you guys different ways to do things so you're not just taking the template and plugging your information in and not customizing it to you. I'm sure people see a lot of that. Now, the next three slides, as I was doing research for some stuff, I had some questions I needed to look up. I came across this article by this person named Danny Stewart. And so this slide, that quote is her, and the next two slides in this PowerPoint are by her. Here is the link to the article where I got all this information from. There was a lot of information there, but there was a couple of things that I thought were really, really outstanding that I wanted to introduce to you guys, and I wanted to give her credit for it. She says, her quote here is, in college, when I took media writing classes, I was told to write at a fifth grade reading level. At the time, I thought that was completely underserving the audience, but really, it's more to help them ingest information quicker. That is so true. And we're about to talk about some of those other pitfalls people fall into. Um, I worked with someone, my last job, I worked with someone that taught in our business department, and she used to be a resume reader. She was, if you go on LinkedIn and you see someone that, an advertisement for somebody to help you with your resume, that's what she did. Um, and she helped me with mine, and you know what, I'll post it for you guys to see what it was like before I gave it to her and then what it was like after I gave it to her. And it's really interesting because those people do know what they're doing with that. Now, she also, before she had that job, worked at Coca-Cola as a resume reader. She would, any job you applied for at Coca-Cola, you sent your resume in, they all went to her. She would sit down, she would pick up your resume, she would look at it, and then she would decide within 10 seconds if they were going to ask you any more questions or not. So if your resume didn't grab her attention within 10 seconds, then you were most likely going to be out of there. And that's not an uncommon thing because you can look at something and judge pretty quick, do I think this is going to be beneficial to help me or not? Okay. So what you want to do is grab them with your resume to make sure they want to keep reading it. All right. Here's a quote by C.S. Lewis. Don't use words too big for the subject. Don't say infinitely when you mean very. Otherwise, you'll have no words left to use when you want to talk about something really infinite. So what we're saying is don't use too many sesquipedalian words. What's funny is that word means someone that uses very big words. And that is very ironic because that word itself is a sesquipedalian. Um, for example, why use endeavor when you can use try? Why use commence when you can use start? Why inquire when you can ask? These are things that sometimes people will use trying to sound smarter than they are. And there have been studies by Princeton and I think it was Wharton Business School that people that wrote their letters and they took a source and they added more, fancy words to it. The words that were simpler to read, the resumes that were simpler to read, the ones that could be processed faster in the brain were the ones that they wanted to hire. Um, and even in this day and age, with all of our attention spans getting shorter and shorter because of the cell phones, and I mean, even now when I stand in line somewhere, I pull up my cell phone to do something on it because I just can't sit still. So when we take those words and put them in a sentence, we have, may I inquire as to when you will endeavor with the commencement of your homework? Or you could just say, may I ask when you will try and start your homework? I think you guys can see what I'm talking about there. The top one is trying to sound more lofty when you're just really trying to say something. Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about from Danny here is here's a quote by Coco Chanel. Before you leave the house, look in the mirror and remove one accessory. She was speaking to women that put on too many accessories, too much jewelry, rings, bracelets, necklaces, earrings. Yeah, that was what she was trying to say. What we're trying to say in terms of it here in resume writing and cover letter writing is fluff words. And she coined this term plus words, and I think it's an excellent term for it because it really speaks to it. These are words that people use when they're trying to puff up their resume and put more words into it. You really want to get your resume down to as few words as possible. You really want to get your resume and your cover letter down to one page. You don't want them to have to flip through multiple pages to look at your resume. or a cover letter. So words very often that are fluff words are very little rather in order to really. So basically more all just. Here's an example that I took right from her article that she wrote. Uh, Using long sentences with big, beautiful sounding words made me feel intellectual, but really is unnecessary there. But all I was doing was making me sound like I was trying too hard. And I was. So see, this really does flow better without really and obviously these words that have no meaning there, these words that are you're using to just build up your resume. And I think this is ironic because on her article, she had rewrite it over and over again. And my grammar check came up and suggested using repeatedly. So I think that's funny. So rewrite it repeatedly to make it tight, get it as tight as possible. Take out multiple quotes that say the same thing. If you talk at the top in a bullet point about how you're going to, or how you have your ServSafe certification, then don't talk again down at the bottom about the score you made on your ServSafe certification. Does that make sense? You don't need to do multiple things. And also find bigger paragraphs and cut out a sentence or two. Yeah. I also recommend when you're working on your resume, read it out loud. Read it out loud at least 3 times. Anytime you change something, a word, a phrase, delete a sentence, go back to the beginning and read it out loud again. That was something my mother taught me, and that was something that I do, and I'll spend a lot of time on things like that to really try to polish them up and make them easy to read. Remember, you only have about 5 seconds to make that first impression. Last thing that is on this PowerPoint is here are some helpful links. These are things that as I was doing some reading, I found all of these and I thought these had a lot of excellent information to use. And that is it for this session of management. I hope you all have a great night.